All right, here's a quick rundown of the three basic confidence intervals that you're learning about. The Z interval and T interval both accomplish the same thing. They both help us to try to find the true average coming from the population. The only difference between the two is that in the first one, the Z interval, you have to be given the population standard deviation, which is really a rare thing to be actually handed that. So most often in real life, you won't have the population standard deviation. You use the next best thing, which is the standard deviation coming from the sample. And then the third interval that I've taught this year is on proportions. A proportion is the same thing as a percentage, and we use the one proportion Z interval to figure out what the true percentage is from the population. In order to use that, we must have the percentage coming from the sample. So here's a quick rundown of the 3 steps you need to do each of these intervals. I won't get into the formula as much. I'm just going to show you the necessary pieces for a complete answer. So let's begin with one example here. Suppose that I want to find out the true average from a population, the average amount of money that somebody buys, the average amount of money that someone pays for a brand new car. So suppose I want to find the average number of money that someone pays for a new car. So instead of actually asking every single person on the planet how much the money they paid for the brand new car, let's suppose that I just add a sample of let's say 40 car owners. And from that sample, I could actually figure out the sample average. Let's say that the sample average for a brand new car was $30,000. If I went online, I might be able to hunt down a standard deviation estimate or a standard deviation for prior years of car ownership. Of course, that'd be very hard to track down, but suppose that I found out that $10,000 is the standard deviation from all previous years recently of buying new cars. With these ingredients right here, I can put together a confidence interval. The last thing I do need to know is what confidence level I want to use. And suppose I want to use a 90% confidence level. I can take all those ingredients there and actually build up a complete answer for where the true average might fall. It takes 3 steps. The first step is to check to see if it's a simple random sample. This is just 40 car owners that I interviewed, so this happens to be a no, which is not great news for us. We would want, ideally, a simple random sample. We also have to make sure we have enough in our sample. And we have 40 owners, or 40 new cars, so that's actually enough for the bare minimum of 30. So that's a check in the good direction there, that we have enough people in our sample. And that's it for the first step. For the second step, you'd have to decide which of the intervals you're going to use and name the interval, either by name or by formula. Since we have these ingredients right here, this is a Z interval. And you can use the calculator or the app that's on the iPad to do all the calculations for you. So we would go to the calculator, you would press Stat, and then go to the Test menu. On the app, it's the same thing, and you can actually see it's there down at choice number 7. Okay, by selecting that, it gives you some options about how you want to input the information. In this case, it's lighting up the data option, but we don't have a list of data. All we have are the actual statistics. So you would choose statistics and just type in the ingredients that are on the board. So it's $10,000 for standard deviation, $30,000 for the average. There's 40 owners, and we're using 0.90 as our confidence level. Hitting calculate or enter at the end will actually give you the interval, and it gives you a pretty good estimate of how much people would pay for a brand new car. So according to this, somewhere between $28,000 to $32,600 would be a very good estimate of where the true average price might be for a brand new car. The third step is to actually describe what your confidence level actually means. And one popular phrase you can use is talking about this as a success, measure of success. So the method used to find this confidence interval has a 90%, in this case, 90% success rate in finding the true average. So 1 out of every 10 samples won't actually be a good one. And we don't know if we've got a good one or a bad one. 9 out of every 10 on average will give us a good estimate. And that's giving us a measure of how confident I am in this answer. So pretty confident. I can change this question into the t interval very quickly by just making one small change. If I instead knew that it was the sample standard deviation as being $10,000, everything up here would be exactly the same except for the second step. Since our standard deviation is coming from the sample, it should widen our confidence interval just a little bit. So on the second step instead, it would be a t interval. And again, it's right there on your calculator. If you go to stat and then slide to tests, you have to actually go down a ways. It's probably number 8. And you can see that I already have the information typed in from the prior example. The only difference is it would be a sample standard deviation that I'm entering as 10,000. If you hit calculate, it's important to make sure you hit enter on the app. But you can see that I basically got the same result as before. It's just a little bit wider because I'm not using the pure and correct standard deviation. I'm using an estimate of the pure standard deviation, or the population standard deviation. I'm using the sample to get me there. So it makes my interval just a little bit wider, but the result's exactly the same in terms of the flow of how the question goes. So now that we've done that, let's wind things back up and do one more example, which is the one proportion z interval. Let's say instead of trying to figure out how much money people are paying for cars, let's say I'm interested in what type of cars they're interested in or what color of car they're interested in. I think blue is probably one of the most popular colors for cars. So maybe I want to know what percentage of cars are the color blue. In America, not just my neighborhood, not just the parking lot over here, just in America, what percentage of cars are actually blue? So I don't have to count every single car in America. I take a look at every single car. Instead, I could just use a sample. So suppose I take a look at the parking lot outside, and I walk through the parking lot, and I count up that there are a total of 200 cars, and I find that, let's say 55 of them are blue. that tells me a sample percentage that 55 out of 200 cars are actually blue, that my sample percentage, quick math here, 55 divided by 200 would be about 27, well exactly 27.5% of cars on the lot are blue. So I'm going to use this point estimate as my middle of my interval and then go on from there to actually estimate what the true percentage might be in America. Probably someplace below 27.5 and someplace above it. To figure that out, again, it's 3 steps. The first step is very similar. To start off with, is it a simple random sample of cars? No, it's not. Do I have enough cars in my sample? Okay. Do I have at least 10 that are blue? That's a yes. Do I have at least 10 that are not blue? Well, I've got 245 cars that are not blue, and that's more than 10, or equal to 10. On the prior example, 30 was the number you needed there. For the second step, it's naming the test. This is a 1 proportion, or naming the interval. It's a 1 proportion z interval. And the calculator will do the work for you. If you press stat tests and search down 1 proportion z interval, it gives you a place to enter the information. X is the number of blue cars. You don't type in the percent, you type in the number. How many cars total did we have? 200. And if I use a confidence level, again, 90%, I would hit calculator, enter, and it actually gives me the confidence interval, someplace between 22% to 33% of cars in America are blue. The third step is almost identical to the last one. Since I use 90%, I could say that 90% of the samples give an interval that locates the true percentage. So again, 9 out of every 10 samples will be good. Of course, if it was a simple random sample, I'd have a little more faith that this is correct. But based just on looking at just 200 cars, I can estimate that the true percentage in America of blue cars is someplace between 22 and 33%. So if someone said to me, did you know that 40% of cars in America are blue? I would look at this and say, well, according to my calculations of just looking, one morning at how many cars are blue in a parking lot, I probably would say that estimate's probably wrong. I would never know for sure. And those sort of things are the sort of things that we talk about later in the course. We talk about actually taking a look at accusations or taking a look at claims and deciding whether or not the claims are justified or not by taking a look at confidence intervals and also taking a look at something called hypothesis tests. So I know this was kind of a quick walkthrough of the confidence intervals, but your teacher or me has already begun that kind of talk. So this is a good summary, and hopefully it did help.